Good day. We are busy with the series on generational wealth, and today I'm addressing part 3, financial wealth creation. In our previous session, we talked about 5 different capitals, and in this one, of course, a very important portion of generational wealth is the financial wealth. So, what am I going to address in today's session? Defining financial wealth, the pillars of wealth creation, just something on investment strategies, how to calculate your net worth, and then how to grow your net worth. So, first of all, if we look at financial capital, it's important to distinguish, as it's done in the book The Millionaire Next Door, between high income earners and high net worth individuals. Somebody can earn a lot of money, but do not accumulate any assets. And then that person earning the large salary don't have any financial wealth. So often we create, or this financial wealth exists, because we live below our means, we save, we invest wisely. And I do find it that with my clients, the high net worth clients, that's precisely what they did. Few interesting stats on South Africa. Net worth grew in South Africa since 2010 by approximately 7% per annum, which is about 2% above the inflation rate for that period. So not a very, very high growth in net worth. We would have expected people to earn a better return than something equivalent to a conservative investment. More alarming is the household savings rate that is minus 1.2% in the last quarter of 2024, and it has been declining for quite a number of years. So people are not saving. It's negative because the people that have retired are actually using or consuming their retirement. So this is a real issue in South Africa. I've mentioned before that I do believe that financial wealth and generational wealth transfer is not only for the super rich. Every family that can make smart choices can do this, and we have had various such examples. People, one of my clients I can think who did an ordinary job at a government department, just diligently saved, bought extra properties, made some investments, and retired very wealthy. I can remember that some of the most interesting discussions we had overlooking the sea from their property was what to do with the returns every year, how much to give away to the children, and that's a place to be. So there's 3 pillars of financial wealth creation. I've sort of reached them already. First, earn. That will be your job, side hustles or investment income. You need to earn income. I mean, before you don't earn anything, there's no way to create wealth. And then you need to save. So some of that earnings must be put away. And like Robert Kiyosaki said, pay yourself first. So make sure that if you earn money, the first portion of that is set aside for your savings. And a way to make it easier is to automate it. Either a debit order for your retirement annuities or your investment plans, or that's why it's already deducted our pension funds contributions from our salaries. And then the last element of the savings is it must be consistent. Just keep on doing it. It's very boring, but that's how it works. The third portion is then on investing. It's no use to save the money and keep it in a safe at home or under the bed or in a low interest earning bank account. You will actually become worth less. And I've read an article about the case study of a lady and her husband in the United States who in the 50s sold their house, had a lot of money, but they didn't want to spend it, so they put it in the bank to leave it there as an inheritance for their children. And then after 40 odd years, when they passed away, the children inherited this, but because inflation gulped away from that savings, they basically had enough money, the children then, for a deposit on a property. So they became poorer over time because they didn't earn compound interest, which is ascribed to one of the clever guys, and that it's the eighth wonder of the world, Albert Einstein. So Robert Kiyosaki also mentions this in his book Rich Dad Poor Dad, that the rich will buy income producing assets that will, you can see what will happen here. It creates a cycle. You earn more, you save more, you invest. You earn more, you save more, you invest. Whereas the less rich people will often spend that money on cars and houses for themselves to live in. He called that liabilities because it actually takes money out of your pocket. So, if we talk a little bit about investment strategies, the first I want to just quickly address is the whole idea of passive and active investment. Because there's huge debates, I personally believe there's a place for each of those in our investment portfolios. Passive is often much cheaper because there's less research, etc. to be done. It's just linked to whatever the index is on the market. So it tracks the market. It can be good for long-term investments, and an example in South Africa is Satrix. But then we also have our active managers. They do a bit more work, so they have higher fees. But they are often also more skilled. You need skilled people to do the research, to put in the efforts. And what we have seen is that active managers are often performing better in emerging markets like South Africa. Our examples there are the Allan Grays, the Coronations, etc. So, another principle of investment strategies is that we need to diversify our assets in which we invest. Now, there's different asset classes. We have monetary assets, our own debt, we can put in money there. We have bonds, government bonds, big or large corporates. We have property, we have equity, which is shares, and then, of course, also our own business. So what I've done here is that just say that we earn different returns on these. With a bank account, we earn interest. If we put the money, we pay off our own debt quicker, we save interest. If we invest in government bonds, etc., we often do that mostly to earn interest, but there can be elements of capital involved. With property, we want to earn rental income and capital growth. And if we invest in shares, we want to get dividend income and capital growth. And of course, our own business, we want to generate some profit. So tax, nothing in life is free, so we will pay on monetary, the interest is tax. Fortunately, on our own debt, no tax. With bonds, interest is taxable. With property, the net income is taxable, and then of course capital gains if we sell that property. With equity, the dividends are taxed, although we get it post-tax, and we can have capital gains, and then our business, the profits are taxed. There's always a link to between the return and the risk. So the risk with a monetary investment, the risk of losing your capital is very low if you invest in sound financial institutions. The risk that you won't receive your interest is also fairly low, and you can start with fairly small investment amounts. And because the risk is so much lower, our return is also in the vicinity of inflation plus 1%. If I pay off my own debt first, risk of losing my capital is only when I withdraw that money and spend it on something nice, and I don't use it for future savings. There's no risk of not receiving my income. I can start with a small amount every month that I can pay off. And that's generally when I pay debt, the interest rate is a bit higher than what I would normally earn on investment. So we talk about inflation plus 2%. So with bonds, again, government bonds generally are regarded as low risk. You often need a higher amount, although with retail savings bonds it may be smaller, but you often need a higher amount than with a savings account to start off with, and maybe you can look at inflation plus 3%. Then if we look at property, the risk of losing your capital, that exists. If the suburb in which you purchase the property goes backwards, you can actually lose capital. You may have tenants that do not pay, so you may not receive your income, and often the initial investment is very high. Either the deposit or you must pay the full amount, but you can expect a higher return. For me on property, I personally also like property. It can be a very valuable part of your assets. But if you only have one or two properties, these risks are quite high, quite significant. Because if you just have one property and your tenants don't pay, you get zero from your property investments. Equity, risk of losing your capital, there's always a risk that the company may go bankrupt, etc. But if you are diversified in various companies, even that risk will be fairly small. I remember that with Steinhoff, when they went belly up, I think the largest proportion that any of our clients lost was 0.5% of the total portfolio. Then companies, it has happened during COVID and before, that companies may not pay the dividends level of investment because the costs often with direct share investments are quite high. You need to invest a larger portion for that costs, and then we can get inflation plus 7%. That's the I think the 100-year average of the JSE. And of course your own business can be very profitable, but I also always just warn with this. I've also seen it quite a few times where a profit money generating business went belly up and the shareholders, the owners, lost everything. So even with your own business, it's not wise to just put everything in one basket. And we often look at these, and if we look at the historic returns, we notice that there is no clear-cut pattern on what property class does best in a certain year. And for that reason, it's best to have good diversification. And I prefer to look at it in this way, according to your risk profile. So if you are very conservative, you will have less in equities, but you will still have equity exposure and perhaps a bit more in property. You will have a lot of bonds and a lot of cash and a smaller offshore proportion. If you are more aggressive, you will have a larger equity exposure because you are happy to go with all the ups and downs that may exist. And then you will have less in property, less in bonds, very little in cash, and may even want a larger offshore exposure. And again, research has shown that if you build these diversified portfolios, include all asset classes, you actually reduce your risk and can also increase your return and decrease the volatility over the long run. So diversification, looking at all the asset classes, lower your risk, makes for more stable returns. But then because some asset classes will perform worse than others in any given year, we need to look at the total portfolio and not only at the asset classes individually. If we invest regularly, even small accounts, it makes a big difference. If we should reinvest our returns, that's the only way that we really push the value of our investments. Look at our risk profile, make sure you diversify, and then very important for me, this needs to be reviewed annually. There's no asset class, no investment that I can make that will be the best for me for the next 20 years. I will need to evaluate that. So, very important step before we can even look at generational wealth is we need to know where we are. If we don't have a balance sheet or a list of our assets and liabilities, there's no way that we can start planning how this should be transferred to the next generation. So a very important step is to calculate your net worth. And that you do by listing all your assets, what you own, and the value that you can use is what you can sell it for now, and list all your liabilities, what you owe, and your net worth is then your assets minus your liabilities. So I've just included this example. So assets could be, and I prefer to classify them between personal use assets and income generating assets. So the income generating assets, that's my investments. So personal use assets can be my residential property, vacation properties, art collections, vehicles, jewelry, money in the bank, my current account. Income generating assets could be properties that I rent out, my pension fund, unit trust, shares, fixed deposits, money markets, interest in businesses. And then my liabilities, again there, me and a good colleague Jacob Barnard prefer to divide them in three categories: good debt, unavoidable debt, and bad debt. Good debt is debt that we apply for income generating assets because they generate money for us. Unavoidable debt, that is the debt on our own house, because very few people can buy a house cash, and then on our own vehicle, but we believe just the first vehicle. All other debt, mortgages on your vacation property, other loans, credit cards, store cards, bank overdrafts, etc., is then classified as bad debt. If I then take my total of my assets minus my liabilities, I get my net worth in financial terms. So, what's some strategies to grow this net worth? I think number one is we want to get out of debt. So pay off our highest interest debt first. If we reduce this liability amount, it will grow net worth because we deduct less. Start investing early and consistently. I've said that a few times now. Avoid lifestyle inflation. What often happens is that I get an increase at work, then I move to a more expensive property, and I increase these assets that do not generate income. Make income increases work for you. So plow back, reinvest your increases. Look at your taxes. So for me, the money that I spend for my tax advisor is worth every penny. Diversified broadly, and then something very important that we need to teach our children these principles, because time is our biggest asset. Wealth is built with intention. We need to plan it, and that's what we want to do in this series. So, financial wealth, it's about creating freedom, opportunities, and legacy for future generations. So my challenge for this week, I want you to go and determine your net worth, and then use this formula from the Millionaire Next Door. Take your age, multiply it with your annual pre-tax income, divide it by 10, and that should be your expected net worth. So if we look at our example, let's say the gentleman's balance sheet that I had earlier is 50, earns 300,000 per year, divided by 10, that gives me 1.5 million. And you will remember that we said their current net worth was 600,000. So are you below or above that mark? You should have been at 1.5 by now, is only at 600,000. So clearly you must have a look at your standard of living, because you are not accumulating wealth. And then we can think, what are we going to do to change this position around? Okay, with that said, I hope you enjoyed this session.